I never imagined my 28th birthday would turn into a fight for my future.
Your mother would have wanted this, my father said, standing across from me, his voice firm but cold. He was asking, no, demanding that I sign over my entire inheritance, $500,000, and to who? My stepsister Rebecca, the golden child sitting beside him, dripping in diamonds that were probably bought with loans they hadn't even paid off. My name is Samantha Reynolds. And if you've ever had to stand up to your own family when they tried to take advantage of you, I hope my story gives you strength, because I didn't just say no, I stayed quiet while they plotted behind my back to declare me mentally unfit. But they didn't see what I had up my sleeve, a single envelope, one piece of paper that changed everything. But before I tell you what was in that envelope, let me tell you how this all began. I grew up believing I was loved. My mother, Eleanor, was my hero. She was smart, elegant, and strong, a financial advisor who believed in saving, planning, and standing on your own 2 feet. When I was just 10, she survived breast cancer. That changed her. She started making plans for every possible outcome, especially for me. Always have your own safety net, Sammy, she told me. Even if you fall in love, even if your life is perfect, protect yourself first. Back then, I thought she was being overly cautious, but she was preparing me for something I couldn't yet imagine. I was 16 when her cancer came back. This time it was aggressive. In just 6 months, she was gone. Her funeral was quiet. I remember standing between my dad and a relative I didn't even know, holding on to the last picture I had of her smiling. What I didn't know was that before she passed, my mother had set up a trust fund for me, $500,000, a mix of life insurance, investments, and family money from her parents. But I couldn't touch it until I turned 28, and neither could my father. That was her rule. It was only for me, and he knew it. For a few months, my dad was heartbroken, or at least he seemed that way. Then came Diane. She worked at my dad's office, his assistant. Loud, flashy, always dressed in expensive clothes and heavy makeup. The total opposite of my mother. What shocked me most, I found out later that she and my dad had been seeing each other before Mom died. They got married less than a year after we buried her, and Diane didn't come alone. She brought her daughter Rebecca. She was exactly my age, which made it feel even worse, like I was being replaced, not just as a daughter but as a person. Rebecca was everything I wasn't. Blonde, loud, spoiled, and great at pretending to be sweet around adults, especially my dad. Suddenly he changed too. The man who used to cheer at my school awards now barely remembered what I studied. Instead, he praised Rebecca for getting a C+ in English and bought her a car for her 17th birthday. Me, I got a college fund I had to beg to use. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house. So I left for college, got a scholarship, found a part-time job, and worked hard to pay my way through. I barely visited home except for holidays, and even then, I didn't feel welcome. Rebecca, on the other hand, private college, new car, sorority life, shopping trips, Cancun spring breaks, all funded by dad. Still, I didn't let it bring me down. I followed my mom's path and studied finance, got a job in the city, lived in a tiny apartment, saved money, skipped luxuries. By the time I turned 27, I had no debt, a growing career, and a clear plan for my future. And then came the letter from the trust company. It said the full inheritance, all $500,000, would be released to me on my 28th birthday. Along with it came a note in my mom's handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm not there to see the woman you've become. This money is my love for you. Use it wisely. Build your life. I'm so proud of you. I cried for hours. It felt like one last hug from her. She still believed in me. But while I was planning how to use that money, invest in a small business, buy a modest house, set some aside for the future, my father, Diane, and Rebecca had other plans. 3 weeks before my birthday, Dad called. "We want to throw you a dinner," he said. I was shocked. They'd barely celebrated my birthday in years. Still, I said yes. I should have known something was off, but I wanted to believe maybe they were trying to make things right. What I didn't expect was that dinner would turn into a betrayal I'd never forget. The day of the dinner arrived. I drove my little Honda Civic through the long curved streets of my father's expensive neighborhood. Their house was huge, the third one they had moved into since Dad married Diane. It looked more like a showroom than a home. Fancy marble floors, giant chandeliers, tall windows with white curtains that looked like they had never been touched. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt completely out of place. My car looked like it didn't belong next to Dad's shiny black Mercedes and Diane's white Range Rover. But I reminded myself I'd earned everything I had, every dollar, every step. Dad greeted me with a smile so wide it looked like he had practiced it in the mirror. There's my birthday girl, he said, hugging me like he hadn't ignored my last 3 birthdays. Diane appeared behind him, air kissing near my cheek like she was afraid to get too close. Samantha, darling, she said, looking me up and down, that outfit is very practical. I nodded. It gets the job done. Inside, the dining room was decorated, but barely. A few sad-looking balloons, a generic cake that said Happy Birthday Samantha in pink icing. Honestly, it was more than I had expected. Last year, they sent me a gift card that wasn't even activated. Who else is coming? I asked. Just us, Dad said, and Rebecca and her boyfriend Tyler. A few minutes later, they arrived like celebrities. Rebecca's laugh echoed through the house before I even saw her. She wore a tight red dress, her hair perfectly curled, and jewelry that sparkled under the lights. Her boyfriend Tyler walked in behind her, all smiles and cologne. Happy birthday, sis, Rebecca said, giving me a quick hug that smelled like a department store perfume counter. You look nice. Thanks, I said, though I knew she didn't mean it. Tyler gave me a handshake like he was closing a business deal. So you're the smart sister, he said, smiling. I've heard a lot about you. Only the good stuff, I hope. We all moved to the living room for drinks. Dad poured me a glass of wine, but his hand was shaking slightly. I noticed the glances he kept giving Diane. Something wasn't right. Rebecca took over the conversation immediately. She talked about her new job at a boutique marketing firm. She made it sound glamorous. Big office, travel perks, great salary. Then she casually added, Daddy pulled a few strings to get me in. The owner's a friend. Of course he is, I thought. I shared a little about my own promotion. I had recently become team lead at the firm I worked for, something I had worked hard for over years. But no one really listened. Dad quickly changed the subject to golf, asking Tyler about his swing. When dinner was ready, we moved to the table. But the birthday gifts on the side table stayed unopened. We sat down. Me, Dad, Diane, Rebecca, and Tyler. A roast chicken, some sides, nothing special. And then it happened. Dad cleared his throat and looked directly at me. Samantha, he said, there's something we want to talk to you about tonight. Something important. I set down my fork. He continued. Your mother left you that trust fund. $500,000. You'll receive it on your birthday, right? I nodded slowly. Tomorrow, yes. Why? He leaned forward, hands folded like he was negotiating a business deal. Rebecca is going through a difficult time financially. Her student loans are heavy. She's trying to build her life. Diane and I thought maybe you could help her. I blinked. Help her? I asked. How? Diane chimed in. Your mother would have wanted you to share, Samantha. She was such a generous woman. Rebecca just smiled silently, her diamond earrings sparkling in the light. Dad continued. We're hoping you'll consider signing over the inheritance to Rebecca. At least part of it. Maybe even half. My heart dropped. You're not serious, I said. Of course we are, Diane said. It's the right thing to do. Family helps family. I looked at Rebecca. She didn't say a word, just sat there waiting like she was already counting the money. No, I said. Dad's smile disappeared. Samantha, no, I repeated. This money was left to me. For my future. My mother made that very clear. Dad's voice grew colder. You've always had a selfish streak, Samantha. You've had every opportunity handed to you. I laughed bitterly. Are you kidding? I worked for everything I have. Rebecca's the one who's been handed everything. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice calm but sharp. This isn't about the past. It's about what's fair. What's fair, I said. Fair would be you paying back every cent Dad spent on you, while I worked 2 jobs in college. Dad stood up. We tried to be civil, but if you're going to be unreasonable, Diane added, we've talked to a lawyer. If you're mentally unwell or not fit to manage the money, the trust can be challenged. I stared at them, stunned. You're threatening to have me declared mentally unfit? Dad looked away. Diane said nothing. Rebecca smirked. It's just a backup plan. That was when I realized. This wasn't just about money. This was a betrayal, years in the making, and they thought I was weak enough to fold, but they had no idea what I had done quietly in the background. I took a deep breath, reached into my purse, and pulled out an envelope. I laid it on the table. What's this? Dad asked. A copy of Mom's final letter to me, I said, and a signed statement from the trust attorney. It confirms that any attempt to contest the fund, without clear evidence of mental instability, will be denied, and considered harassment. Diane's eyes narrowed. You lawyered up? No, I said calmly. I prepared, just like Mom taught me. No one spoke for a few seconds. The air in the room changed. The tension was thick. Rebecca finally whispered, This is unbelievable. I stood up. Thank you for dinner, but I think we're done here. And I walked out, head high, heart pounding. What they didn't know was that I was just getting started. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not because I was scared, but because I had never felt so deeply betrayed. By my own father. He'd raised me. He'd kissed my forehead goodnight. He taught me to ride a bike. And now he was trying to steal from me. Not just money, my future, my mother's legacy. The entire ride back to my apartment. Their voices echoed in my head. You're not being fair, Samantha. Your mother would have wanted this. If you won't share, maybe you're not fit to manage it. No. I knew my mother. I knew what she wanted. She had built that trust fund exactly so. This wouldn't happen. She knew my father.
Maybe she even suspected he'd remarry quickly. Maybe she even imagined a woman like Diane and a stepsister like Rebecca, and that's why she made it ironclad. But that night, all I could feel was the weight of it all. I curled up on my old couch in my one-bedroom apartment, still in my blue dress, still wearing the birthday makeup I had put on with such hope earlier that day, and I cried. I cried for the mother I missed every day, for the girl I used to be, for the woman I had become, strong alone, and now under attack. The next morning was my actual birthday. I woke up to a few texts from friends, a call from my coworker Karen, and a beautiful email from my mentor at work, but nothing from my dad, nothing from Rebecca, nothing from Diane, and honestly, that said everything. Around 11 a.m., I got the official call from the trust manager. The funds had been released into my new account, which I had set up just for this purpose. It was real. The money was mine, $500,000. But more than that, it was my freedom. But the peace didn't last long. Later that same day, my phone buzzed with a new number. Hello, I answered. Samantha Reynolds? A man's voice said. My name is Greg Holton. I'm an attorney working with your father. I'd like to speak with you about a potential petition regarding your mental health status in relation to the management of your inherited funds. I froze. He wasn't bluffing. They were really going to try it. I'm not interested in speaking without my own legal counsel, I said calmly. He started to respond, but I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. My own father was trying to legally claim that I was too unstable to handle money, just so Rebecca could get her hands on my inheritance. That night, I did two things. First, I called the attorney who had helped my mom set up the trust, a kind man named Mr. Hartwell, who remembered my mother clearly. I've been expecting this, he said when I explained everything. Your mom told me she was worried something like this might happen. He agreed to represent me immediately and said he would file a cease and desist if any more legal threats came from my father's side. Second, I made a decision. No more silence. I scheduled a personal day from work, and then I drove to my father's office, not his house, his office. I wanted to confront him somewhere where he couldn't scream, lie, or twist the story, somewhere public, somewhere he was vulnerable. The receptionist looked surprised when I walked in, but she waved me through. I knew where his office was. I'd visited many times as a kid. He was sitting at his desk when I entered, papers in hand. He looked up and froze. Samantha, he said. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. You actually tried to have me declared mentally unfit, I asked. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't want it to go that far. Diane doesn't get to make decisions about my life, I snapped. And neither does Rebecca. This money isn't yours. It was never yours. And it sure as hell isn't hers. I was just trying to keep the peace, he said, looking older than I'd ever seen him. You've always been so strong. I thought you could handle it. And Rebecca can't, I asked. That's her problem, not mine. There was silence. He looked ashamed for a moment. I lost your mother, he said softly, and I made some bad choices afterward. You didn't just make bad choices, I said. You replaced her. You replaced me. And now when I finally get the one thing she left for me, you try to take that too. I pulled out a printed copy of the trust attorney's letter and placed it on his desk. This is your warning, I said. Try anything else and I will take you to court, and I will win. He didn't respond. I turned and walked out. That night I slept better than I had in weeks, but I knew it wasn't over yet. People like Rebecca and people like Diane don't give up that easily. And I was right. The next morning my email inbox was flooded. Rebecca had posted a long emotional story on social media about how I refused to help family, about how I selfishly hoarded wealth while my own sister struggled. She even included a photo from my birthday dinner, cropped to show only the presents and cake. The comments were brutal. Most were from strangers who didn't know the truth, but some were people I did know, old friends of my dad's, relatives who hadn't called me in years. Suddenly I was the villain in Rebecca's sob story, but I wasn't going to play along. I took screenshots, saved everything, and I waited, because while they were playing games online, I was building something bigger, something my mom would be proud of. The days after Rebecca's social media post were hard. I tried to keep my head down at work, but people had seen it. Someone even forwarded it to my personal email with the subject line, "Is this really about you?" It hurt. Not just because of the lies, but because of how quickly people believed them. I didn't respond. Not yet. I had something more important to focus on, because while Rebecca was busy playing the victim online, I was building something real. You see, my mother didn't just leave me money. She left me knowledge, the kind of knowledge that changes lives. I'd spent years working in finance, saving, planning, watching people throw away their futures for shiny cars and luxury bags. I knew I didn't want that. So instead of hiding from the drama, I focused on launching the business I had been planning since before my 28th birthday. It was something I'd always dreamed of, a women-led financial coaching platform, focused on helping young women, especially those from broken or difficult families, take control of their money and their lives. I named it Eleanor & Co. after my mom. It started small, just a website, some videos, a blog, but I poured my heart into it. I used part of my inheritance to hire a branding consultant and a developer. I even invested in some ad space. Within a month, we had our first 100 clients. Within 3, We had a full calendar of workshops, mentoring calls, and sponsorship requests. And while I was changing other women's lives, my father's world was falling apart. It started with a rumor that he was in debt. Big debt. Apparently, those upgrades he and Diane had made over the years weren't paid for in cash. The house, the cars, the vacations, all of it, financed with loans and credit. Even Rebecca's college tuition had been paid using a second mortgage on their house. I didn't celebrate their misfortune, but I wasn't going to save them either. One afternoon, I received a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was Rebecca. Samantha, I know things got out of hand. I shouldn't have posted what I did. I was angry, but I want to fix things. Please call me back. I didn't call her. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer, just in case. But a week later, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I came home from work one evening and found an envelope slid under my door. There was no return address, just my name, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter, not from Rebecca, not from Diane, but from my father. Samantha, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. What I did, what we tried to do was wrong. I let Diane pressure me. I let my own pride blind me. But the truth is, I was jealous. You grew into a version of your mother I could never match. Strong, brilliant, independent, and it scared me. I let myself believe that helping Rebecca was somehow your responsibility, that sharing your inheritance would make things fair. But I see now how unfair that was to you and to Eleanor's memory. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again, but I'm sorry. Dad, I sat on my couch and read the letter again and again. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo what they tried to do, but it was a crack, a small one, in the wall between us. I didn't reply, not right away. Instead, I kept building, kept growing, because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My business kept expanding. A podcast reached the top 100 in the business category. A viral video about how to protect your money from toxic family members hit over 1 million views. People were listening. People who had lived through similar things. People who had felt alone, just like me. One day I received a message from a girl named Emily. Hi Samantha, I saw your video on inheritance abuse. My stepmother tried to take my college fund after my dad died. Watching you speak out gave me the courage to fight back. Thank you. And I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of purpose. This was why my mother had left that money. Not just to protect me, but so I could help protect others. And what happened to Rebecca? Well, the social media fame faded. The marketing job she had thanks to my father's connections, gone. Her boyfriend left as soon as the money dried up. Last I heard, she moved back in with Diane. Their fancy house sold to cover their debt. They reached out again. This time, not to demand money, but to ask for work. Yes, work. Diane emailed my company, applying for a job as an administrative assistant. Rebecca applied for a position in marketing. My assistant flagged the applications and brought them to me, unsure how to respond. I smiled and said, politely decline. Wish them the best. I didn't need revenge. I had something better. Peace. People think a happy ending means everything gets wrapped up neatly, that the villains are punished, the hero wins, and everyone claps. But real life isn't a movie. Real healing takes time, and real freedom doesn't always look the way you thought it would. After rejecting Rebecca and Diane's job applications, I sat quietly in my office for a long time, not out of guilt, but because I was proud. Proud of the woman I had become. Proud of the business I had built. Proud that I didn't let bitterness take over my heart. I thought back to everything I'd been through. Losing my mother at 16. Watching my father marry someone who erased her memory. Being pushed aside, ignored and used. Being asked, on my birthday, to sign away $500,000. Facing threats to my mental stability. And being dragged through public humiliation online. But I didn't fall apart. I rose. And every time I received an email from another woman who'd been through something similar, I felt stronger. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a story I was helping others write for themselves. A few months after everything settled down, I visited my mother's grave. I hadn't been there in a while. Not because I forgot her, but because I had been too hurt, too angry, and too overwhelmed. But that day, I brought flowers, her favorite pale pink peonies. I sat down beside her stone, brushed off some leaves, and just talked. I kept it safe, Mom, I whispered. Your gift. Your plan. I protected it. The sun was warm. A soft breeze moved through the trees. I wish you could have seen the business. I named it after you. I think you'd be proud. I closed my eyes and felt the wind wrap around me like a hug. I forgive him, I whispered. Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace. And I meant it. I didn't forget what my father did, but I wasn't going to let his choices chain me to the past. Not when I had a future to build. By the end of that year, Eleanor and Co. had grown from a passion project to a movement. We hosted workshops for college women, young single moms, and even older women starting over after divorce. We taught financial literacy. We shared stories, some even harder than mine. We gave women tools to say no, to set boundaries, and to build wealth they could protect. People ask me all the time, do you ever hear from your dad anymore? The answer, occasionally. Mostly emails. Sometimes they were updates, sometimes quiet apologies. He and Diane eventually split. The debt, the pressure, and the truth finally caught up with them. They sold the house, downsized, and from what I heard, he went back to working part-time in real estate. I didn't reply to most messages, not because I was angry, but because I was done being the one who carried the weight of the relationship. Rebecca, she stopped trying to contact me altogether after the job rejection. And honestly, that was fine. I no longer needed her to understand or accept me. She had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. 3 years later, something incredible happened. A publishing company reached out.
They had read my blog, listened to my podcast, and followed Eleanor and Co.'s growth. They wanted me to write a book, not just about finance, but about family, betrayal, healing, and reclaiming your power. I hesitated at first. Then I remembered that envelope, the one I gave my father that night, the one that reminded him I was smarter than he thought, stronger than he realized. I said yes. The book was called Unshakable, The Power They Didn't See Coming. It became a bestseller, not because I was famous, but because too many women saw themselves in my story, and they were tired of being silent. I'm 34 now. I live in a home I bought myself, on a quiet street near the city. I still drive my Honda Civic, though I upgraded the engine and added a few safety features. Old habits die hard. I still keep a framed copy of my mom's letter on my desk, the one she wrote about the inheritance, the one that reminded me that love can last longer than life. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened on my 28th birthday, but I no longer replay it with pain. Now when I think about that night, the wine glass in my hand, Rebecca's diamonds, my father's demand, I smile, because they thought I was alone. They thought I was soft. They thought I could be manipulated. But what they didn't see was that I had already learned from the strongest woman I'll ever know. My mother didn't just leave me money. She left me a map, and I followed it all the way to the life I deserved.